My name is Justin, and I am a son of God and an addict, and the host of the RICO 12 speaker meeting. And thanks to my God, the steps, and the fellowship of other addicts, I am sober one day at a time since June 19th, 2015. And for that, I am beyond grateful. Welcome to RICO 12. We are an organization whose addictions include alcohol, drugs, lust, and sex, food, and gambling, just to name a few. We come together from all places, faiths, and backgrounds to learn the similarities of addiction and to gain tools and hope from others who are walking a similar path. We invite recovering addicts with at least 1 year sobriety and who are actively working their recovery in their respective fellowships to share their experience, strength, and hope on a live Zoom webinar each Friday at noon Central Time for 20 to 25 minutes. Then we, the live audience, get the opportunity to ask questions of that speaker. Now, if you're hearing this meeting in recorded podcast form, and would like to participate as a live audience member in the future, please go to www.reco12.com. That's RECO12.com to learn more and to submit your email address there to receive weekly invitations. If you have not yet done this, please go to the podcast platform of your choice and rate and review RICO 12. It helps us work our 12th step and gets these messages out to more people just like you and me. Another way to help us work our 12th step is to consider donating to RICO 12. We are a self-supporting service, and we gratefully accept contributions to help us continue to be self-supporting. In order to do that, you can go to reco12.com/support, or you can click the link to PayPal that will be in the live meeting and also in the show notes of the podcast. When you contribute, please specify the meeting number. This is meeting number 72. Moving right along. It's a great journey we're on here. One more word about our speakers before we introduce today's speaker. When we line up a speaker for a meeting, we ask them to seek guidance on what and how to present so that they can reflect the light that they have been given. That light will inspire hope, meaning, worth, and growth in each of us, the listening audience. Now, let's introduce our guest speaker for today, Lydz G, whose topic is, where is the power in the low spots? Now, here's a little bit about her before I turn the floor over to her. Lydz G, about them, before I turn the floor over to them, I apologize. Lydz G has been in medical treatment for their eating disorder on and off for the last 12 years and began their journey in 12-step a year ago in the rooms of Anon. After the bad breakup of their first open, long-term lesbian relationship, the big book says, we addicts are extremists, and Lydz is no exception. They went to 3 Zoom meetings a day seeking experience, strength, and hope after being given their first conception of God in recovery, the gift of desperation. Their obsessive mind was put to use immediately in service, where they helped organize a worldwide recovery marathon for BIPOC, Black, and Indigenous people of color, therefore serving the second power greater than themselves, cultural resilience. There they found their sponsor and began their journey in the steps through Big Book recovery. They identify today as a multidisciplinary addict. Today, they talk about a higher power in the form of astrology, tarot, culture, tradition, community, source, spirit of the universe, and Mother Earth, and how to genuinely seek our own concept of God when there are certain traits and low spots ahead. God is meant to be experienced and not understood, but Lydz understands so far that their creator fills their life with jokes and lessons. Take it away, Lydz. The floor is yours.
Hi. Oh my God. Thank you so much for having me and for your service in this podcast, Justin. RICO 12 was a staple in my early recovery, and I'm privileged to give back what was so freely given to me. So I'm going to start off by setting an intention based on the set-aside prayer along with the Wellbriety, which is the Native American version of the third step prayer. Divine Spirit of the universe, highest power, Spirit of good orderly direction, please set aside and help me set aside anything I think I know about myself, about my addictive patterns, about the Big Book, the 12 steps, the program, the fellowship, RICO 12, the people in the fellowship, and all spiritual terms, especially the term God, so that I can have an open mind and a new experience with all of these things. Please help me to see the truth. Oh, great Spirit, whose voice I hear in the winds, and whose breath gives life to all the world, hear me. I am small and weak. I need your strength and wisdom. Let me walk in beauty and make my eyes ever behold the sunset. Make my heart respect all that you have made and my ears sharp to hear your voice. Make me wise that I may know all you have taught my people, the lessons you have hidden in every rock. I seek strength not to be superior to my brother, but to fight my greatest enemy, myself. Make me ready to stand before you with clean and focused eyes. So when life fades as a fading sunset, may my spirit stand before you without shame. And so it is. Aman netevote, which is in my native language, says, I send greetings your way. My name is Lydz, and I'm a multidisciplinary addict. I'm grateful to be given a daily reprieve that keeps me green and growing in recovery. Whew. Okay, so let's start with what it was like. So in the big book, there's a description of the alcoholic and addict on page 110. And it's a chapter called Two Wives, which later became the Al-Anon program, which is meant to support people who are in relationships with alcoholics. So on type 1, it says, your husband, and also like in my fellowship, we put ourselves in the text. So you, your husband, whoever, may only be a heavy drinker. His drinking may be consistent or constant, or it may be heavy only on certain occasions. Perhaps he spends too much money for liquor. It may be slowing him up mentally and physically, but he does not see it. Sometimes he is a source of embarrassment to you and his friends. He is positive he can handle his liquor, and it does him no harm that drinking is necessary in his business. He would probably be insulted if he were called an alcoholic. The world is full of people like him. Some will moderate or stop altogether. Some will not. Of those who keep going, a good number will become true alcoholics after a while. So in an effort to be armed with the facts about myself, I have some notes here. So type 1, I was like this with alcohol from like 2006 to 2012. And some of the other, like what I considered party drugs, whether or not I was partying, from 2015 to 2018. So that brings us to type 2, your husband / you / whoever, showing lack of control, for they're unable to stay on the water wagon even when they want to. They often get entirely out of hand when drinking, using, thinking, acting out. They admit this to be true, but is positive that they will do better. They have begun to try, with or without your cooperation, various means of moderating or staying dry. Maybe he is beginning to lose friends. His business may suffer somewhat. He is worried at times and is becoming aware that he cannot drink like other people. Sometimes he drinks in the morning and throughout the day to hold his nervousness in check. He is remorseful after serious drinking bouts and tells you how he wants to stop. But when he gets over the spree, he begins to think of once more how he can moderate next time. We think this is a real person, and we think this person is in danger. These are the earmarks of a real alcoholic. Perhaps he are addict, what have you. Perhaps he can still tend to business fairly well. He has by no means ruined everything. As we say among ourselves, he wants to stop. So for me, and I had to write this down because I have a real quick forgetting part of my brain. I'll be like, I don't think I was like that. But according to what I wrote down, I was like this with alcohol and weed from 2009 to 2017. So sometimes in my fellowship, we talk about type 3 addicts. So I'm gonna go ahead and read that. The simple summary is like beyond human aid, right? This is when you start really needing a spiritual experience. The husband has gone much further than husband number 2. Though once like number 2, he's become worse. His friends have slipped away. His home is a near wreck and he cannot hold a position. Maybe the doctors have been called in and the weary round of sanitariums and hospitals have begun. He admits he cannot drink like other people, but does not see why. He clings to the notion that he will yet find a way to do so. He may have come to the point where he desperately wants to stop, but cannot. His case presents additional questions, which we shall try to answer for you. Okay, yeah. You can be quite hopeful of a situation like this. So for me, that was my eating disorder. I started my first diet when I was 9, and I dipped my toes into fashion modeling, and I had been hospitalized for my eating disorder several times. And it was really embarrassing because other people who were doing the work that I was doing were like not going to the hospital. Even though they were dieting, they were not frequently at the gates of insanity or death like I was. So then type 4, this is my favorite. Just kidding. It's not, it's a favorite later. It wasn't a favorite in the moment, but now I'm like, oh dear, I love it. Okay. Type 4, you may have a husband, you yourself, whoever it is, of whom you completely despair. He has been placed in one institution after another. He is violent or appears definitely insane when drunk. Sometimes he drinks on his way home from the hospital. Perhaps he's had delirium tremens or like the withdrawal symptoms, right? Doctors may shake their heads and advise you to have him committed. Maybe you already have obliged to put him away. This picture may not be as dark as it looks. Many of our husbands were just as far gone. They got well. So for me and Anon, if you asked me 2 years ago, I would be like, oh my God, that's the kind of person I attract for some reason. I don't know. They just come to me. And then when I entered the person that I was dating, when I entered the program said something to me that actually really helped me see what I was doing. They said, you're pretty condescending, but you do the same shit and you're not even drunk. So when I read it again, talking about he is violent or appears definitely insane when drunk. One of the characteristics of sex and love addiction is to sexualize violence. And I thought it was romantic as hell to think I was going to get murdered by a lover. Like, I thought that was cute. And that's apparently not necessarily a normie thought. So that's cool. Going on to, it talks about coming back from the hospital and drinking. So for me, what that looked like is I would break up with my person of addiction because I would know something was wrong. I'd be like, this is not how I want to be living in the world. And I would be like, shit, I'm suicidal. Like, I want to die. I shouldn't want to die. I should go to the hospital. Sometimes it would take me like, an attempt before I understood that's what I was doing because I was just, wherever I was. And I would break up with this person, end up in the hospital for my suicidal ideation or attempts. And I would literally call them when I got out of the hospital because I was like, oh, well, how are they doing? Because this is how I'm like, just the powerlessness. Doctors may shake their heads and advise you have them committed. I had a doctor who was a sleep specialist that was like, your relationship, like, I can't even treat you because you can't sleep because of what you're doing. Like the doctors were just like, I don't know what to tell you, one of my doctors was like, I could see why you would want to go on an alcoholic bender and go into rehab so that you can break this pattern, but I can't treat you. So, whatever else. And I'm like, maybe I'm powerless. So again, this picture may not be as dark as it looks. Many of us were just as far gone, yet we got well. So that's a little bit about my qualification. I also started realizing that my type 4 tendencies also applied to how I work in nonprofit. So for me, my job was paying me less than I made in food service, but I was down to martyr for like any cause. This was another thing that I romanticized. It was like, oh, I'm like, I just figured that the ways that I was going to die is I was going to be murdered by a lover in an act of passion or whatever, or I was going to be taken down by the FBI because I was like, just no, like that's not necessary. It is not of maximum usefulness for me to martyr myself for a cause. Grateful for recovery. And even though I did all this, I didn't think that I was an addict because I really thought that an addict did coke, and that's what made that was what I had in my head of like, well, I don't do coke, so I'm not an addict. And then, of course, in 2019, there was a person that was really hot who was like, let's stay up and do whippets and coke. And I was like, sure. And then I was like, maybe I'm an addict, maybe. So yeah, that's kind of how it started. And this is going to sound goofy, but an important thing for me to remember in my recovery is that the whole time I was doing this, I was looking for a spiritual experience. And sometimes I actually had spiritual experiences from people that I was enmeshing with or drinking and using. acting out. Like, I really did love all of these different tactics to have a spiritual experience. I loved drugs. I loved my sex and love and intrigue addictions. And at the time, I just kind of thought of it as like an immersive lifestyle because I'm an artist and I like to immerse myself in the experience. And it was fun until I became like fully powerless. So I learned that I was powerless because I was starting to have like bad trips instead of spiritual experiences. I used to say like, well, I just party to like celebrate life and like feel the highs more. And then at some point I was like, oh shit, I'm numbing out. And the big book actually calls this blotting out the consciousness of our existence, which is or of our intolerable situation. And that's like heavy, but that's accurate as hell for me. So yeah, one of the reasons that there's a couple of reasons that I talk about this so openly. There's a page, I think I have to let go of the expectation to know all the pages, but somewhere in the big book, in the glum lot part, it says, why shouldn't we laugh? We have recovered and we've been given the power to help others. And that is so true for me. And it's also like, if newcomers came in and we weren't laughing, they wouldn't want what we had, right? So I look at the insanity, the powerlessness, the unmanageability of my life, and I wouldn't want a higher power that wasn't present in those moments. So for me, there's a line in Bill's story, which I was able to mark before we got on page 10, that I really appreciate. And these are the kind of conversations that, like, when I was in active addiction, I would stay up till 4 a.m. trying to have these conversations. So in Bill's story on page 10, he says, I'd always believed in a power greater than myself. I'd often pondered these things. I was not an atheist. Few people really are, for that means blind faith in a strange position that this universe originated in a cipher and aimlessly rushes nowhere. My intellectual heroes, the chemists, the astronomers, even the evolutionists, suggested vast laws and forces at work. Despite contrary indications, I had little doubt that a mighty purpose and rhythm underlay it all. How could there be so much of precise and immutable law, yet no intelligence? I simply had to believe in a spirit of the universe who knew neither time nor limitation. But that was as far as I had gone. And then on page 11, he goes on to talk about how, like, he thought God was annoying. I'm paraphrasing. I think he's saying he thought God was annoying. Because the wars which had been fought, the burnings, and I don't know that word, whatever. My integrity is not all the way there yet. So whatever that word is, that chicanery, the religious dispute had facilitated made me sick. I honestly doubted whether, on balance, the religion of mankind had done any good. And I really resonated with that. I'm like, why is this old black guy, like, why am I supposed to read his story? But for me, it really resonated because God was a concept that was used to, like, colonize my people. When I talk about a higher power, I'm not talking about a colonial sky daddy. I'm talking about, maybe it's the spirit of the universe. Maybe, I don't know, something that isn't me. Turns out I'm not God. Turns out I can't make people do what I want them to do. And I used to play God. And of course, yeah, if it weren't for the steps, I'd still be playing God. I tried to play God by even making notes about this podcast. I'm already like so off script. So you know what? That's cool. I'm not God. We'll see where it takes us. So one of my my first higher power was spite. Like, I had no will to live. But if you were like, oh, that's like a whole sad story, I'd be like, no, out of spite, I'm going to thrive. So I had like a call with the suicide hotline where they put me on hold, and I was like, I'm going to live just because you bugged me. So that to me was how God or whatever used my character defects to save my ass. Like, that was really important. That was spite. It's not a forever thing. It's like what we call like a log. It keeps us from drowning, but you know, eventually it gets waterlogged and you need something new. So spite helped. That's, yeah, I'm saying what I said. Spite was helpful. And then like culture was also a really big power greater than myself. And let's see, okay, so in my primary fellowship today, we have like, okay, it's probably going to sound morbid, but whatever, here we go. So in Spiritual Gangsters, which is my primary fellowship, we use a workbook that was made by Cameron, who has done this podcast before, Cameron F. And it's kind of like a tourniquet method. And for me, like Al-Anon and ACA were like soft and gentle. And like, I wasn't going to make it through like a slow version. Like I was like so ready to go off on another visit to the gates of insanity or death. Like I did not care. I could not stay focused. So when I came into the program and I saw this workbook and they were like, oh, you can get through it in, you know, however many weeks, like they said like a couple months. And I was like, whatever, sure, I'll show up. I don't know what that means, but okay. On step 4, there's like a formula that you can use. And it's kind of like right next to the character defect. So like, or hold on, how am I saying this? Okay, so there's 5 columns instead of just the traditional 4 columns. So in the 4th column, it's like, oh, maybe I've been selfish, maybe I've been distrusting, maybe X, Y, and Z. So someone like me, this is probably not everyone, but if you're like me, if you got it bad like I do, I would see that and I would be like, time to die. I'm a piece of shit. I'm out of here. And so I always kind of joke with my sponsees that it's like, no, like we do the column 5 because that's like, oh, I'm distrustful. It's ruining my life. Oh, but the answer is that I'm going to pray for trust, like, which is, you know, and 6 and 7 is how I become willing to do that. So for me, it's like, I feel so divinely protected to have been brought into the rooms of recovery and gotten something that could handle me where I was at, because yeah, I wasn't going to make it through a slow and gentle process. I needed like the answer immediately. I was like, give me the answer key. I'm down to do the work. And column 5 is a really good higher power, because something that feels important to talk about is like, we come in as addicts and we hate ourselves, and it's hard for us to see the integrity. Like looking at all the drugs I did, looking at all the shit that I did, it's really hard to see the integrity that was there. But addicts are super creative. Like every addict I've ever met, I'm not trying to be corny, but this is like fact. Addicts are creative. Addicts are resourceful. Addicts have a lot of integrity. And a lot of the time it's like the reason I didn't stop. So I was like, no, this is my autonomy. You can't tell me what to do. And even though that is not necessarily the most useful way for us to practice that autonomy, that integrity, it's still important. Like there's still a divine purpose for that. And I think to me, like I wouldn't want a God or a higher power that wasn't present in that moment. I also, for me, it's like, I think people joke a lot about crystals, but I'm definitely a crystal bitch. And for me, it's like, even if I don't know too much about what this rock is supposed to do, sometimes I just have to look at rocks and be like, I did not and cannot make this rock. Therefore, there is something I don't understand. Therefore, I can try to keep an open mind. So yeah, that's a lot about what it was like. That's a lot about what it was like. So yeah, what happened? I became obsessed. Once the first acronym I heard for God that really resonated with me was the Gift of Desperation. There's also like good orderly direction, great outdoors. They say make a God of your understanding, and people use that creativity that we used to use to get our next fix to like define God. And it's great because if God is infinite, we can always come up with something new. And for me, I'm like, okay, the Gift of Desperation brought me into an Al-Anon room, and I came in during COVID. I had been doing clinical recovery, which wasn't spiritual, and it worked for a lot of people. It wasn't working for me because once I stopped with my eating disorder, I remember one time being drunk out of my mind and being so proud of myself that I didn't count the calories. And I thought I was recovered. And apparently that's called the whack-a-mole of addiction, because if you're like me and you don't have the spiritual experience, you're just going to find, like, I can ruin my life with Netflix. You know, I can ruin my life with anything. God gave me something. I don't know what, God gave me some sort of determination. And that's why I got to be like every day, what is the divine usefulness for this? Because I know what happens when I try to take control of the situation, but what's the bigger picture here? Even if I don't understand God, which I never will. And that's part of the fun, I guess. I am all over the place. So yeah, basically what happened was I had been given the gift of desperation. I knew my life was unmanageable. I was powerless. The first thing that was bigger than myself that could restore me to sanity was like a meeting room that talked about things I cared about. And I had to go to a lot of meetings to find a room. They say if you don't like the first one, go to 6 more or something like that. I think they say in Anon. I was like, I want to taste every single meeting and see if are there meetings for witchy types, are there meetings for Satan? It's just like, I wanted to experience all of it because that's the way that worked for me. I found BIPOC rooms and I was able to help. Like I have a political organizing background. So I was like, oh, I can work a spreadsheet. I haven't done the steps. I don't know what y'all are doing, but I can do spreadsheets. And that was a way that I was helpful. And then I ended up getting into a bunch of different meetings and ended up in Spiritual Gangsters, where there's a bunch of other people like me who kind of need this reprieve every day. And in my fellowship, we have meetings every day. We have some meetings are like 3 times a day. So to wrap up, I had a really big experience in this last week. Yeah. And what happened, and this is going to probably sound jarring because I've been giggling this whole time. But yeah, I lost a family member this week to addiction. And she died of stage 4 lung cancer. I hadn't made my amends to her. And if I weren't in program, I would have been in the hospital again. So for me, like, the question that I presented is like, where is the power in the low spots? Because shit's wild. It's really a lot out here. Like life on life's terms is pretty wild. Like it isn't meant for us to handle alone. It is violent sometimes. It's fucked sometimes. Like no one came here on a retreat because they were having such a good day that they just wanted to go learn about the 12 steps. You know, people come in here because things are really intense. And for me, really sticking to like the column 5 assets. So what is the truth of the situation? How can I be of maximum, like, how can I be helpful to others? We already know that the situation is bad, but is it helpful for me to make a meal right now? Versus if this happened 2 years ago, I would have been trying to shove food down people's throats and then went off to kill myself. And that's not my reality today. Like there are still like low spots ahead, as I think like trials in those spots ahead, or however the big book talks about it. But like there are more tools. I'm not trying to sound corny, but like I don't know. I guess this is why my notes cut off. Like I don't have any, like I don't know, just I'm here. Like I'm literally here, and I have been able to, like when I do my 1 through 3, steps 1 through 3 in the morning, and I ask like, okay, well, I guess I'm powerless over my circumstances, right? When I try to control my circumstances, my life becomes unmanageable. I just make it about whatever's going on right now. And then step 2, am I willing to believe that there's a power greater than myself that can restore me to sanity? Today, spite doesn't work. I'm excited for you if you can use spite. Like, please, like, I mean, you know, that's not healthy for me to live vicariously through you, but know that I appreciate that is the reality some people are in. I can no longer use it. So today it's like, in page 66 in the big book, it talks about how like the resentment, I'm gonna butcher it, something about how like resentment is a dubious luxury of normal men. I can't get mad anymore. Like when I'm mad, fires happen. I don't know. It's not maximum usefulness. So step 2 is like, am I willing to believe that there is a way that I can be helpful? Is there a power greater than myself? Will the spirit of the universe restore me to sanity? Can I go stare at a tree? Will it restore me to sanity? And then step 3, am I willing to turn my thinking and my actions over to the care of my higher power as I understand it in this hour? the next hour I might be like, no, don't say God around me. I'll catch on fire. That's fine. It does not matter. Like my God does not have that fragility. So I know we're at times, so I'll wrap up with just, that step 1 through 3 decision saves my ass. The 12 steps, I owe my life to the 12 steps. And I'm excited to hear from y'all. And I don't know, thank you.
Lydz, that was great. Thank you so much for sharing yourself, your own personality and your own experience. I love that you kept it honest to who you are and what's important to you. And I think that's important to not how do I say this? Sometimes I'm so stinking rigorous. I want everything for myself to go exactly how I want it to go. And I love how you just let yourself go and surrender to your higher power and let it happen. And I felt that coming through. Very authentic. Thank you so much. All right. A reminder to our live audience to ask Lydz a question. Please type it in the Q&A link at the bottom of your Zoom window. We've had a few come in and I've written down a few also. What I'd like to start off with, Lydz, is towards the end of your share there, you talked about how one's column 5 can be a great higher power at that point. For maybe the new people here, either live or those who will listen in podcast format, can you explain what column 5 is in your own experience and how that can work as a higher power?
Absolutely. Thank you for this question. So column 5 is like the answer. It's like the opposite action, I guess, if you're doing like the kind of clinical understanding. It's like the opposite action. So if I'm in distrust, then like trust is the obvious opposite action. But if you take the column 5 by itself, it's values that it's a list of values that have been simplified. So if I was prepared, that would be great because I would have them with me right now. But one of my favorite ones that my sponsor had me add into mine was perspective to see God's victory in my situation. Honesty, integrity, and restitution is the opposite of dishonesty. It's not just honesty, it's also integrity, and it's also restitution. So it's just like a list of principles that are great. So it's kind of like, even if you don't have that list, it's like your values tell you what your higher power feels like in that moment. Because sometimes, my actions don't match my values. So if I'm just like, can my actions match my values? Am I being helpful? That's kind of like the column 5 mindset, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate that take on it. It made me look at it differently than I had previously, and I think that's helpful. All right, a question that came from Ryan L., which I believe this is who our guest speaker is going to be next week. So we'll get a little bit from him here. Ryan asks, can you take a couple of minutes and talk about the change you experienced in your relationship with yourself because of recovery?
Oh my God, yeah. Ooh, that's a fun one. So pre-recovery, I really felt like my meat suit of a body was getting in the way of everything. Like I could never get things right. I, hated myself because I was always like, I'm thick. Like I'm thicker than the models that I was around. And I was like, what's happening? Like I had all these critiques. And so that's kind of like what I came in with. And also growing up in a home with addiction, like, oh shit, I'm talking to, whatever, here we go. Yeah. Working on, God has not removed cursing from me yet. So please excuse, but I think people know the problem. I don't think I have to talk about the problem. I think people are pretty well acquainted with the problem. And now what's kind of changed is like, I am not separate from nature. And there's like a thing in the big book that says like, when I criticize you or me, I criticize God's handiwork. So it's like, oh, wait, like, and the funny thing is I'm watching the outside world after I do the work and I accept like, oh, like my body is meant to be like a certain size and shape. I'm not supposed to change it. Like, also, I've been able to have gratitude of like, whoa, I can taste the most delicious food. Like I can like, instead of being like, food makes me fat, which used to be where I was at. I'm like, have you had for some reason, my brain went the sweetie meal from McDonald's. That's probably not the perfect divine, but I'm able to appreciate things and I don't have to indulge as much because I'm like, oh, my fingers, like I can type. I can like connect with people. Like my feet take me places. Even though I have bad knees, I can still bend down and get something. And, you know, that's cool. Like having that gratitude. Yeah, I think that's what I have to say about that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. We have another question that came in, and this is from Nikki M. This is a combination question and some encouragement, which I think is awesome. And before I get into this question, I did want the topic of this question is one that I wanted to address and just express my condolences to you and your family for the loss of your loved one. So this question is, what exact instructions in the big book did you follow to get through the loss of a family member? Now, she says page numbers and exact quotes are not required. Don't worry about that. Just general actions you took. And then Nikki says, I've watched you be reborn, Cupcake. Thank you for being part of our fellowship. So the question is, how did you, where did you get some inspiration or some help in the big book as to how to get through the loss of a family member?
Thank you so much. Love you, Nikki. And thank you it's cool to be in a fellowship where people know like, oh, I better tell this perfectionist not to try and do the page numbers. So thank you. I appreciate that. There was a lot, and some of them I would like think of and get mad at, you know what I mean? So I think the first thing that comes to mind is page 66, because it talks about like how basically other people can handle resentments, but people like me can't. And it makes sense to be like, that was so unfair, because the way that it all went down was, you know, I wish, and I think it's important to say that I really do wish that this person would have passed like in her sleep peacefully. And that's not what happened. And other people might be able to get mad about that, but that is what would lead me to the gates of insanity or death. Like I no longer get to do that, because I cause a lot of harm when I take that thought and let it run my life. So I don't get to do that. One of the ones that made me really mad, which is I use it and I needed to be humbled by it because it made me mad. Like I woke up thinking it and I was like, fuck that. Oh, I'm sorry. God has not removed that. I was not into it. And it's cling to the idea that in God's hands, your dark past is your greatest asset. And I'll always say that, like when newcomers come in, they're like, I think I'm too crazy. I don't think it's going to work. It's like, no, you're just going to be like a super sponsor. That's how this goes down every time. And when I woke up thinking that one day, I was like, oh God, you better not say that right now, because this wasn't fair. Like this was not fair. And like, the more I sat with it, the more I was like, okay, fine. Like, let me admit that it was a messed up situation. Let me admit that I'm angry. And like, I've been able to connect with people. Usually whenever I get this mad, I end up moving to a new city. Like I don't usually sit and cope in the feelings. So the fact that I was able to be like, hey, this other person who was also there when it happened, are you okay? And like, how can I be helpful? And yeah, your job now is to be in a place where you could be of maximum service. That's a big book quote where I'm like, okay, what's maximum usefulness? What's maximum service? God wants us to be happy, joyous, and free. I thought that was rude, because I was like, then why'd you do that? Why did you even design bodies to be able to do that if you want us to be happy and joyous and free? Page somewhere between 417 and 420 talks about how like I have a magic magnifying mind. And when I focus on the problem increases. When I focus on the solution increases. I was like, there's no solution. She's dead. Like, what do you want from me? And then I was like, well, I page 66 tells me I don't get to stay mad because that'll kill me. So this acceptance piece, like, okay, so what's the solution? Like the solution is like making sure that the other people who went through it with me are okay, making sure I'm okay. Because at this point in the past, I might have had the luxury of going off to another wherever. But I don't have that luxury anymore. So I'm like, how can I take care of half the time when I do my step 3 prayer, I'm just supposed to drink water, which irritates me because the thing I don't like the most in the big book is like, we relax and take it easy. What, like my mind would never, but that's what has helped so many other people become like better. So those are a few things. And even when I've gotten mad at them, like entertaining them has been a lot more helpful than entertaining other thoughts that are not a maximum usefulness.
Lydz, I love the authenticity that you're sharing here. I love you're going through and you continue to go through this really difficult time where anger, resentment, victim thinking, those types of things for me would sink in very quickly. And I love how you're talking them out in an honest and emotional way. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate that. All right. Another question in from Deborah. Now, this is one that we will get to hear again. She says, the native prayer you said was so beautiful and brought me to tears. Would you mind repeating the name of it? And then at the end, I'm going to ask you to say it again so we can close out with it because I loved it too.
Yes, of course. Thank you. I'm so glad again that I get to share something that was freely given to me. So I think when you like search it, you have to search like Native American third step prayer. I heard about it in the rooms of Wellbriety. So if you're Native, there is a beautiful fellowship of Wellbriety where people talk about like not just and not spiritually authentic things that come culturally. So yeah, we'll definitely do that again at the end. If you are Native and looking to plug into Native recovery, then look into Wellbriety. And I think, if you search Wellbriety third step prayer, I think it's hard to find, but Native third step prayer, I think is where it's at.
Thank you so much for sending us that way. And I'll do a search as I'm doing the show notes and put it in the show notes of the podcast. So I'll have a link to it there also. Awesome. Thank you, Lydz. Another question from Ryan. Ryan says, what is the single most important mindset or attitude change you had to make in order to let go of yourself and truly seek recovery?
I love that question. The single most. I'm like, honestly, as soon as I think one of the steps is more important than the other, I learn about the significance of each step. So I'm like, the 12 steps all have been really critical in my recovery, like each and every one of them, especially the quieter ones, because I don't, as you may have picked up, I don't naturally pause. I don't naturally meditate. And a lot of my like mindset shift is instead of being like, oh, this is some bullshit, my brain just has kind of started rechanneling to be like, okay, what, God, what? And sometimes my third step decision is more like, oh God, thank you for this coffee. Thank you for this morning. Thank you for my life. And sometimes I'm like, what do you want? But I'm here because the essentials of recovery, the how, is like honest, open-minded, and willingness. And sometimes I'm like, whoever is in charge here, to whom it may concern, I am not open-minded about this. So if you're going to be so all-powerful and omnipotent, you're going to have to help me out because I don't got this. I don't. But my God can handle it. And I think that's pretty cool.
I agree. I think some of the most powerful times in my own recovery and in my own life is when I've told God that I was pissed at him, that I'm not happy with the situation right now, but help me learn from it, whatever it is, because I'm not happy with you, God, but I got to trudge through it. So let's trudge. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. All right. A question in from Naika. Awesome. She asks, what has been the surprising part of your journey in recovery thus far? And then she offers a message here that she loves you and thanks you for your vulnerability and carrying a powerful message. So the question, what has been a surprising part of your journey in recovery thus far?
I didn't die. That's it. Because at this point, I'm like, sometimes I just have to remember that I woke up today. It's like one of those things where it's like you hear people say that and you're like, God, these corny old people always say it like live, laugh, love, whatever. But I'm like, oh, I fully woke up today. That was not my will. So whatever I can accomplish is a bonus from what I was trying to do a couple years ago. So yeah, I guess the biggest thing is I'm alive, and also like I've been restored to joking, because for me that's what's important. I was not joking for a minute and I did not like that. So God has restored me to like understanding that there's still jokes even when you get sad for a long time. That is so corny, but that is my answer.
That's so good. The closing line of your intro bio was that so far your creator fills your life with jokes and lessons, and the jokes there. So do you have like a specific joke, funny haha thing that you felt your higher power has come in and brought into your life?
Oh man. So I guess the best way to sum it up, and I will just use when I had not yet been right sized as an example. So I grew up assuming I was going to be famous, as an addict does. And I was just like, whoever writes my true Hollywood story, which again, I'm a little old, whatever, whoever writes my bio, my Netflix special is just going to be like, whoa, that was so the opposite of what they said. Like, it's like anytime I think I know something, I experience the opposite. And I'm like, I can't really think of an example. But I think that a lot of people probably understand the feeling. I don't think I'm alone in it. I think that God is a joker, but also a morbid joker, which I'm learning to appreciate.
That's awesome. Thank you. All right. Naika asks, how has sponsorship impacted your recovery? I love that question.
I also love this question, coming from my sponsor too. So as an Al-Anon type person, I came in like ready to sponsor. Like I know a lot of people are like, well, I had both sides of not being right sized. So part of me was like, I'm gonna save addicts, yay! And then part of me was like, oh, this bitch, like me, you're gonna make me the person someone goes to when they're struggling. Like, I'm not gonna tell them to slash the tires. I can't tell people to do problematic things. I have to tell people what does God say, and ask people what their higher power. Like, so I did not know how it was gonna pan out. But like my sponsees, and like the big book says, like they become like the high spots of our life, and like watching people recover, like, and whoever is writing the script on my life always sends me people who were doing the shit that I was doing, feeling really powerless and like, oh, I've already been to this many programs and I'm never going to get better. And I'll be like, cool, do you want to circle and underline the things my sponsor told me to circle and underline? And they're like, not really. And I'm like, well, I didn't either, but I'm better, you know? I mean, I'm still wild, but I'm not dead. So that's something we could try. And like watching people recover and help other people, and like, it makes me so happy. And it shows me that like, for me, the people who come in fighting it the hardest are often like working really hard to protect like the softest, squishiest centers. Not to call everyone here soft and squishy, but like, I don't know. For me, it's like, that is really important to me, because I get into a lot of self-hate because I'm so standoffish or whatever my addict brain, my defense mechanism try to tell me. But at the end of the day, it's like passionate people come in real wild and they do the biggest work. And I get to see that every single day. Yeah, I mean, I really don't have words. I'm trying to put words on a spiritual experience. I cannot put words on a spiritual experience. But if you haven't started sponsoring, it's cool. You should try it, just because that's what saved me. Maybe it'll help you. I don't know.
I loved a phrase that you shared there. And as soon as you said it, I didn't hear probably the next 2 minutes of your talking, because my mind just went bing. You said, I'm still wild, but at least I'm not dead. I'm still alive and moving forward. Love it. to me, that spoke to me of it spoke against my perfectionist desires. I'm not perfect. I'm still a mess, but I'm still alive. And that is a miracle. And I am going to celebrate that I'm still alive and still sober in recovery. What a beautiful concept. Thank you. Thank you so much, Lydz. All right. Before we close out here with closing reading, Lydz, do you have any final words of wisdom that you'd like to share with us?
If you're new, you must be a really passionate person to have been brought to this space with us today. And I just want to share, or if you're returning or if you're having a bad day, like there's no accidents. And I could get into the astrology of today, but that's not a timeless thing that, would be true if you're listening later. So I guess my final thought is like, you're here. Like, I can't not be corny about this. You're here. That's a miracle. And I guess my closing thought is, I don't know, try it. I don't know, try the program. I don't know, try 100 meetings. But like, I'm excited to hear about, I don't know, the rest of, I was going to say time and space. I don't get to know all that. I don't think I have any closing thoughts except for like, yay, we did this. We're going to do more shit. Let's go.
Love it. And I loved your praise snaps that you had in there. For those who weren't here physically to see that, her snaps when something of praise comes up are just beautiful. I love it. Lydz, that was a great RICO 12 weekly speaker meeting for all addicts and those wanting to learn more about addiction and the recovery therefrom. If we didn't get to your question, or if you have other questions, please go to rico12.com/forum and join in our community and ask those questions and answer others' questions that will come up. I invite the audience to come back next week. If you've not yet gone to rico12.com and submitted your email address, please get on that invitation list so that you can join us live each Friday at noon Central Time. Next week, we will be hearing from Ryan L., whose topic will be honest self-amends. And I'm looking forward to that one. All right, now let's launch off into the rest of our day with that Wilbriety third step prayer that Lydz told us about.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So let's take a second to come into the moment. O great Spirit, whose voice I hear in the winds, and whose breath gives life to all the world, hear me. I am small and weak. I need your strength and wisdom. Let me walk in beauty and make my eyes ever behold the sunset. Make my heart respect all that you have made and my ears sharp to hear your voice. Make me wise that I may know all that you taught my people, the lessons you have hidden in every rock. I seek strength not to be superior to my brother, but to fight my greatest enemy, myself. Make me ready to stand before you with clear and focused eyes, so when life fades as the fading sunset, my spirit may stand before you without shame. And so it is.
And so it is. Awesome. Keep coming back, everybody. It works when I work it. So work it. You are worth it.
Standing still a moment, carving out this time, reflecting on the landscape of this life of mine. Peaks too high to conquer, streams too wide to cross, troughs too deep to walk through without incurring loss. Yet here I am, still standing tall, despite the rough terrain. One like me survived the storms and walked through wind and rain. Still standing. I will fight the good fight, still searching for glimmers of